Well, Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Every job has its nightmare scenario. I asked a lawyer a few weeks ago what his nightmare scenario is. He said, oh, that's easy. It's sending an email intended for your client to opposing counsel. A surgeon might tell you, oh, I know my job's greatest nightmare. It's operating on the wrong limb. And God's honest truth, I asked my assistant this morning, so what's your greatest fear here at Washington Hebrew? She said, oh, that's easy. It's giving you access to your calendar. The rabbinate has its own greatest fear, and I want to share that with you this evening as we enter into this new year. The greatest fear of any rabbi is that you spend all summer preparing for the High Holy Day sermon, and then the day before Rosh HaShanah, world events transpire, and you have to throw the whole thing away. And that's what happened yesterday at 1 p.m. That's what happened yesterday as Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles toward Israel. So a ballistic missile is a serious thing. If you were to measure a ballistic missile, it would go from this side of the bima all the way to this side of the bima and more. They go up into outer space and crash down on their intended target at 15,000 miles an hour. 181 of them fell onto Israel yesterday. And so the clergy team was in constant contact with each other, Rabbi Shankman and me especially, because what I had prepared and what Rabbi Shankman and I worked on had to change. Rabbi Shankman, tomorrow morning, be here for it, has a powerful message on what it means to stand up for the people of Israel. And tonight, I want to talk about what it means to be a people. What it means to be a people. Now, thank God, the intended mass casualty event resulted in 2 injuries in Israel. Somebody tragically killed in the West Bank through falling shrapnel. And according to the Times of Israel, a number of people treated for acute anxiety. So I texted the clergy team yesterday. I said, look, we made it into the Times of Israel. It's a very anxious day. But tonight's going to be a different message than what I was planning on giving. And I hope that's okay. It's going to be a little less polished, and I hope that's all right. Normally, a sermon marinates over time. It takes months and months to figure out, but tonight it's a little more raw, because I'm feeling a little more raw. It's a little more present, because I just want to have, in a way, a conversation with you. Not just about what happened yesterday, but about what it feels like when something that you love is now at risk. Now, we're going to join in a Torah reading tomorrow morning, where we're going to learn about and reread the binding of Isaac. It's called the Akedah. And this story revolves around Isaac, the second patriarch, but especially Abraham, our first patriarch. And Abraham has had, I think it's safe to say, a holy life and a difficult life. Abraham and his beloved wife Sarah leave their homeland of 70 years and go into the wilderness. And as soon as they leave, they find themselves in famine. Afterwards, Sarah is kidnapped not once but twice by men who wish her harm. After that, Abraham is thrown into these wars that he did not start time and time again. And through all of this, Abraham and Sarah are desperate to have a child, and they can't. And then suddenly, at the age of 100 for Abraham, Isaac is born. Now, Isaac means laughter. Isaac represents joy. And all of a sudden, in the midst of so much hardship for Abraham and Sarah, there was joy in their lives. There was laughter in their lives. There was hope for the Jewish future in their lives. And then in Genesis 22, which we're going to read tomorrow, that hope comes crashing down. God calls out to Abraham, and we'll read this tomorrow. Take your son, your only son, the son you love, Isaac. And we know what happens next. Everything we know about life, hope, joy, everything we care about in the Akedah has changed. And we live in a world in Genesis 22 when everything changes. And so why do we read Genesis 22 as we enter into the new year? You know, there are 187 chapters. 187 chapters in the Torah. We could have picked any number of these chapters that would have served this moment of welcoming the new year better. How do we greet each other on Rosh HaShanah? We say, may you have a good and a sweet new year. May you have a good and a sweet new year. And so if you're asking for a good and a sweet new year, shouldn't you have a good and a sweet new Torah portion? And I could give some recommendations if I could rewrite our tradition. What if we did it's my favorite love story in the Bible. It's when Isaac and Rebekah, his wife, when they meet. And Rebekah, just so you know, is so smitten with Isaac that she falls off her camel. It's an adorable story. Let's do that one to welcome in the Jewish New Year. While we're picking, what about the Torah portion? What about the chapter where Israel leaves Egypt after being slaves for 400 years? That's a great Torah portion for a good and a sweet new year. Or if we're feeling a little more sentimental, the last chapter of our Torah where Moses is overlooking this lush and verdant promised land, knowing that God's children would be entering. It's a great way to start the Jewish New Year. So why do instead we read a story about the things that you love now falling into jeopardy? And I've been wondering this question that I just asked you for the 13 years I've been a rabbi here at Washington Hebrew. And before that, I wondered every year of rabbinical school, 5 years, why do we read Genesis 22 on this good and sweet new year? And just for full disclosure, I was a Jewish studies major at Brandeis, basically another 4 years of rabbinical school. And then I was wondering this exact question. Why do we read Genesis 22 to welcome in this new year? And the answer came to me yesterday. As 181 missiles came tearing down towards Israel, that the more you have to love, the more you have to fear. The more that you love, the more fear there is in your life. Isn't that true? Isn't that true? To my right, your left, to my right, are my wife, who I love desperately. My 2 children, who they'll tell you all the time, I say, I love you more than life itself. There's a lot of love right here. And I love you, this congregation. I love my career. I love this city. I love all of this. I'm a very lucky person to be here where I am, and I feel that, and I know, and you might feel this too, if you are sitting next to someone you love, if you called someone today to wish them a Shana Tova, that for everything that you love comes on the other side, even though we don't talk about it, this specter of fear. Because the more that you have, the more that there is to fear. And to love Israel, and to love this Jewish people, is to have so much more to fear. And so the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, Genesis 22, welcome to the world that we now live in. We experienced that fear yesterday. And there will be times in life, when the things that you love will feel heavy. When the things that you love will bring pain. That's the Akedah. That's the message. And peoplehood, especially over this past year, this idea that we are a people, that has been a heavy burden for me, and for you too, probably. And I've wondered many times over this past year, what would it feel like to walk through the world without knowing that people like Hamas or Hezbollah would do me harm if they could? What would it feel like to walk through the world lighter, knowing that there's not some fringe college student or right-wing podcaster who wished that I did not exist? That's a light feeling, isn't it? And I felt this probably more than any other day. A year ago, October 9th. This is the Monday after the fateful events of October 7th. My family lives in this adorable little community, and I just want to tell you for a moment about our bus stop. I have little kids. At our bus stop are 20 kids, about 20 kids, 20 parents, and 20 dogs. Every single day. We're like a little family, and I love these people. This is our community. And on October 9th, something felt, I don't know what to call it, something felt off. Because my neighbors were loving and kind and compassionate. They were curious. They were by our side. And then they went back to work, as they should. And I was stuck. I was paralyzed. There was nothing I could do that day as the horrors of what happened on October 7th kept revealing themselves to me. And you had that experience too, many of you. Some people can go back to work and back to their lives. And I wondered what it would feel like to live without this thing that I love. And I'm not the only person to ask this question. I'm not the only Jewish person to ask this question. There's a podcast that, importantly, I don't listen to anymore. The Ezra Klein Show. Maybe some of you listen to it. It's a very well-known podcast out of the New York Times. Ezra Klein is the host. He is now, he's at the New York Times now. And he was musing a few months ago, and this is the last episode I listened to. He was musing a few months ago. Are we really safer as a people? Are we really safer with the state of Israel? I was listening, and I'll lay out his argument for you. He says, are we really safer having half the Jewish population of the world in one place with hundreds of thousands, millions of missiles pointed directly at us? Are we really safer this way? Are we really safer having the only Jewish state be a pariah, be scorned by every other nation? Are we really safer with this surge of anti-Semitism around the world that has come from October 7th? Are we really safer with this state of Israel? I listened for a few more minutes, and then off. Because if you are, in fact, a famous podcaster living at the top of a penthouse in New York City, sure, as an academic exercise, let's ask that question, are you really safer? But if you were to ask the 1 million Russian Jews who had to flee Soviet Union because they were so horrifically persecuted, they feared for their lives, are we really safer with the state of Israel? They would, they would laugh at you. If you were to ask the almost 1 million Jews from across the Middle East who had to flee their countries of origin where they had lived for centuries, even longer, at the founding of the state of Israel. If you were to ask Iraqi Jews, Iranian Jews, Lebanese Jews, Syrian Jews, Yemeni Jews, are you really safer with the state of Israel? Again, they would wonder, what planet are you from? And I'm not even asking what a German Jew would say. Or fast forward to today, where French Jews and English Jews and Spanish Jews are all wondering, is this a place where my great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were born, and a place where I am raising my children? Is this a place that is still safe for me? It would be so much lighter to live without something we love. But you lose out on so very much. You would lose out because there's something about being a people that is not just a burden, but that saves us. Being a people saves us. And I want to go back to a conversation from 3 decades ago, roughly, where the Dalai Lama, who was and is facing similar predicaments in some ways as our people have historically, called together a consortium of rabbis from across the denominations. I wrote about this in a recent journal article, but it bears repeating. And he asked this group of rabbis, and I'm going to paraphrase here, how'd you do it? How'd you do it, you Jewish people? How did you survive not just one wave of persecution, but having every generation of the most powerful nations in the world level their full might and technological prowess against you and the people you love? How'd you do it? How'd you do it without borders, without a government, without an economy, without even a shared set of cultural assumptions? How did you do it scattered across the world? And yesterday, we witnessed a miracle of an answer. Yesterday, we witnessed a miracle. Actually, I'll get there in a minute. Let me say this. The clergy team and I sit on many interfaith panels. Maybe some of you have been to these interfaith panels. Usually in these interfaith panels will be a pastor and a priest, an imam, and a rabbi or cantor. And invariably, in each of these conversations, something about Judaism becomes very different, and apparently so. Because Judaism is not just about your connection with God. Do you know this? Judaism is not just a faith. You know how I know, by the way? I'm not going to do this now, but if I were to do a survey of you, don't raise your hands. Some of you here would say you're agnostic. Fine. Some of you here would say you're atheist. Fine. Because Judaism is not just a faith. It is not just about your connection with the divine. To be a Jew is to have this connection with us, with a people. And that's the miracle. That's the miracle. Because, let me go back. In our Akedah story, and I'm going to invite you, not now, but tomorrow, as we are reading through, to pay attention to Genesis 22, verse 5. In Genesis 22, verse 5, Abraham says something that you would not expect him to say. Now, remember the story. God asks Abraham to go and offer his son Isaac. It is a 3-day trek. And they're wandering through the desert. With them is a donkey to carry their things and 2 servants to help. And so Abraham, in verse 5, tells his servants, before they go up this horrible mountain, that we will go up, v'nashuva. Say that with me. V'nashuva, and we will return. We will go up, v'nashuva, and we will return. We will go up this horrible mountain, and we will return. We will return. And so I have felt, and maybe you have too, so profoundly disconnected from a world that cannot understand what it feels like to be a Jew, especially since October 7th. I have felt so, in many ways, detached. But I have felt so connected to you. I have felt so connected to this congregation, to this family, to this people. And last year, as a people, we climbed up a horrible mountain just to the edge of the precipice. We climbed up, and it was heavy, and it was a burden. But what's that word? V'nashuva. We will return. We will return. V'nashuva, like Abraham, like Isaac, like the past 5,785 years, we will climb down that mountain together. V'nashuva. V'nashuva. We will return. And so we say on this High Holy Day season a prayer. Hashiveinu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Turn us, O God, v'nashuva, and we will turn. And so yesterday at 1 p.m., I, like probably most or all of you, was terrified. I was absolutely terrified at 1 p.m. yesterday. And I want to introduce you to the rabbinic calendar because at 5 p.m. yesterday, I had 2 bar mitzvah students in my office studying for their Torah portions. It's just the way the calendar goes. And as these 2 boys were sitting in front of me, reading their Torah portion, getting ready for their bar mitzvah, getting ready to enter into our people's tradition as adults at long last, I realized that I and you will always be smaller than a ballistic missile. We will always be smaller than the thing that is meant to harm us, but we are bigger than time itself. We are bigger than time itself. V'nashuva, and we will return from the precipice. V'nashuva, there has been no mountain in the scope of our 5,785 years that has ever been so dangerous and daunting that we have not come down on the other side together. V'nashuva, we will return. V'nashuva, we are a people. V'nashuva, in this new year, it is we, it is us, it is this people that is the greatest miracle the world has ever seen. Shana Tova. Shana Tova.
We return, we return, we return, return again. We return, we return, we return, return. Again and again to love. return.